Hi, and welcome to Morgellons discussion and microscopy videos. Thanks everybody for showing up and tuning in. We have a very special interview today. Our guest is Michelle McKeon. She's the Lyme specialist based out of Denver, Colorado. Hey, Michelle, how are you doing this morning?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to do this.
Definitely. Now, can you tell us who are you and what led you to become involved with Lyme disease specifically?
Yeah, so I am integrative medicine practitioner. I specialize in tick-borne infections, so Lyme and co-infections like Babesia and Bartonella. And then I also specialize in environmental toxins like mold and heavy metals and things like that because they can go hand in hand with tick-borne infections. I got into this field because I had a personal experience with tick-borne infections. I was bit by a tick and it transmitted Lyme, Bartonella, Protozoa rheumatica, Powassan virus, Mycoplasma pneumonia. So a whole soup of infections. And I went from being completely healthy as an 18-year-old to very debilitated. It was full-blown encephalitis. Um, Within the first few months, I had 70% nerve damage. I developed a movement disorder called cervical dystonia. So I didn't have any control over my neck. And then a lot of my symptoms were neurological. So, like head pressure and trouble concentrating, vertigo, things like that. So it took actually 5 years to get the correct diagnosis, which was frustrating because I lived right outside of New York City. So I was seeing some of the best physicians, Columbia, Mount Sinai, NYU, and unfortunately at that time, this was like, 13 years ago, some of the proper tests that we use today that are more reliable and Lyme literate were not being used. So if you just go to Quest or LabCorp, oftentimes the testing is a false negative. So it took 5 years to get diagnosed. I finally went to a Lyme literate physician. They ordered the right test from the right laboratory, and I got my diagnosis and I began treatment. I did 2 years of treatments in the States. And because it was chronic, when you have chronic Lyme, biofilms form around the infection. Antibiotics can't always get through biofilms in the chronic stage. And so I was just honestly crashing and burning. I was doing different herbals and detox therapies, but um, I wasn't responding. I lost a ton of weight. I was down to 90 pounds. I had to stop. I was a fifth grade teacher at the time. I had to stop teaching. And it got to the point where I couldn't recognize my friends or family. I couldn't process information. I was not myself. I was gone. And so at the time, my doctor recommended hyperthermia treatment, which sounded insane to me. I had a panic attack in the doctor's office. like you're really going to heat my body up to these like crazy high temperatures. But then I looked into it and I spoke with the doctors there. I spoke with patients that went. I ended up going over to Germany to receive hyperthermia treatment. It saved my life. However, as I'm sure you know, tick-borne infections are very complex. There is no silver bullet treatment out there. Anyone to tell you that clearly does not understand how, severe and complex these conditions can be if you're in the chronic stages. So there is work to do. There was work to do when I came home. I really looked into supporting my mitochondria and integrative medicine, going on the right diet and detoxification. I noticed that my apartment that I was staying in had mold, even though it was super clean and you couldn't see it and you couldn't smell it, getting out of that. And I finally started feeling better, decided to go back to school in the health field. I partnered up with the hospitals that offer hyperthermia treatment. So I help with scheduling, pre and post treatment. And then I decided to open up my own practice to help people with chronic conditions like tick-borne infections or gut issues, neurological conditions, things like that. So that's kind of how I got into this field. My brother also was had Lyme disease, and it developed into a very rare neurological condition called stiff person syndrome. So
Oh, no.
I am yeah, I mean, just to see what my brother has gone through, who's like the most important person in my life, and how much it's impacted him, and that it's created other conditions, has made me very passionate on creating awareness on this very misunderstood, debilitating disease.
Wow. So, okay, so was it the case that the doctors just weren't taking Lyme disease seriously, or was it that there was a particular doctor that had a different view on Lyme disease? What was the catalyst that got you out of and back towards remission?
Yeah. So, for the first 5 years that I was diagnosed with different conditions. First they said cervical dystonia, which I do have, and they said, you know what? I think a virus was in your system. It's gone, and you're just dealing with the repercussions. You'll eventually heal. But I would fluctuate, so I knew that we were missing something. And then it came to the point where I was teaching, and I was a fifth grade teacher. I was doing simple math problems, and I remember being at the board, being like, I can't function. Like I'm not able to solve these problems. Like what is going on with my brain? So I went home that night and I read this woman's story online on chronic neurological Lyme disease and how she got tested, the doctor she went to. So I reached out to her. I was like, "Hey, your story and your symptoms sound so familiar. I've been tested for Lyme, but I haven't gone to these laboratories." So she helped navigate me, and I think that's like, I don't know, just going full circle, like that's why it's so important for the Lyme community to stick together. We're not making this much noise for no reason, and just also important to get the correct testing and the diagnosis. But then also with treatment, a lot of times, you hear you have Lyme disease, and anyone, like the initial stages of Lyme, when you hear you have Lyme, you have the doctors that are Lyme specialists that'll be like, okay, we're looking at the right tests. Yes, you clearly have a high pathogenic load. And then you go to the conventional doctors, and this has changed somewhat. But then there's a lot of doctors that are like, do not bring up Lyme disease in my office. You are dealing with a different condition. And so it's the back and forth of being like, okay, well, I wasn't a physician at this time. So like, they both are very reputable doctors. Do I have Lyme or do I not have Lyme? And then you're kind of at a crossroads. And then looking more into it, you see, oh, this is the case for anyone who gets diagnosed. Like there is a lot of discrepancy on whether or not like chronic Lyme is actually a legitimate thing. So then it's looking into, there's so many treatments out there. What are the right treatments for you? So many practitioners will go with like, okay, you have a high pathogenic load. Let's kill, kill, kill. And for me, I was like, all right, like I'm in my early 20s. I don't care about how these treatments are going to make me feel. I can take it. I want to do aggressive treatments and I want to get back to teaching. I want my life back. And that's not how Lyme goes. It is very much about listening to your body and figuring out when to implement treatments in the right order so that you can move forward instead of going aggressive, which can be like one step forward, three steps backward. And that was the hardest lesson for me to learn, but the most important lesson. So then that's how I got into integrative medicine, because my body, even though I wanted it to respond to aggressive antibiotics, it didn't. And so I was like, all right, like where do I go from here? And that's kind of how I looked into these other treatment options.
So, really, for you, this was an ethical concern because you actually needed some help to just navigate the medical system. And it really shouldn't be like that. They should already have the game plan kind of figured out.
Yeah, even like infectious disease doctors. I saw an infectious disease doctor and I'm like, okay, like you should be very Lyme literate. And they're like, nope. They were like, nope, you definitely don't have Lyme disease. And it's just like, okay, well, who do I listen to? So at the end of the day, you really need to be your own advocate and yeah, really listen to your body to figure out what makes the most sense for you moving forward.
Wow, thank you. So in regards to Lyme disease, and what are the different ways in which it can present? We hear often that somebody could have one set of symptoms and then somebody else could have a completely separate set of symptoms with Lyme disease. Why is there that difference? Because somebody gets a cold, they get a cold, they get a cold, but if they get Lyme disease, it's like all over the map. Why does that happen? And can you explain the different ways in which that might present?
Great question. So Lyme can attack whatever you're genetically weak in. and it can impact any organ of the body. So that is why it's known as the great imitator, and also why it is diagnosed with so many other conditions. I recently started working with this hospital that started out as treating people with neurodegenerative disorders, Alzheimer's, ALS, Parkinson's, dystonia, MS, things like that. I help with pre and post treatment. So I started testing them for tick-borne infections and environmental toxins, and they had a whole soup of um, Lyme and co-infections and environmental toxins. So again, one of it is genetics. Another is your immune system, how it can tolerate these infections, because some people can get bit by a tick and be fine until something like COVID happens, or they get in a serious car accident or something like that, and then it becomes activated. Yeah, so, and it also is dependent on like specific strains. So, you can have neurological symptoms and conditions, which was more of my case. You can have arthritic conditions, so you can be diagnosed with arthritis. You can have heart conditions where it impacts your heart. I've known people that have had to get heart transplants. It can seriously impact your gut, and so Lyme does not discriminate to any body part, but I will say that sometimes, depending on the co-infection that you have, it will create more specific conditions. So, like Bartonella specifically, that usually attacks your nervous system, and then it also can attack your bladder, and you can have foot pain. For Babesia, that's another co-infection. You can have like night sweats and flu-like symptoms and things like that. So part of it is genetics, and part of it is the co-infections that you're dealt with, and how your immune system is handling it, and your toxin load.
So you have to kind of go by a criteria to determine if it's likely somebody has these exposures and then go from there.
Yes, exactly. And there are a lot of reputable tests that we can use to help give us the bigger picture of what is running the show. So, is it that you have Lyme disease, but then you were exposed to mold and then it reactivated it? And so we need to take care of your environment, decrease the load, and that can help put the Lyme in remission, because your immune system is not suppressed. But there's also other people that are dealing with Lyme disease. Their immune system can handle it. They get COVID or their COVID vaccine and they don't get better. They find out that Lyme is playing a role, and it's about modulating their immune system so that we can introduce certain treatments their body's going to be receptive to without flipping out because their immune system is overreactive.
That makes sense, definitely. And it's not something that every doctor's looking at necessarily. That's one reason why you'd want to see a specialist, because if you're just not responding to, the general practitioners and what they're recommending, then sometimes you have to look outside the box. And that takes courage to be able to look outside that box.
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes down to the point where it's like you're really sick, you need to get better, and sometimes you need to take it into your own hands to really move forward. And when it comes to tick-borne infections that are very complex, it's looking into integrative medicine, some conventional, some holistic, to really get you to moving forward. And I honestly feel like COVID obviously has been terrible, but it has brought more light to the Lyme community, that it's not just like a quick fix. Hey, you take these medications and you're back. There are people that are dealing with long haul COVID, and so it's not as black and white as people see it.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think you're right about that. It really did illuminate the realities of chronic Lyme disease.
Mhm.
So so talk to us about mold, because that's something that we don't really talk too much about on this show, but that's something that you're very knowledgeable about. My doctor's actually extremely knowledgeable about mold also. So, but tell us what you know about mold, and how can it affect a person with Lyme disease?
I could talk about mold all day. Mold is a massive issue in the Lyme community. I would say the devil's in the detail when you're treating Lyme, and more often than not, mold is the devil. And what happens is when you have a history of tick-borne infections, and you are exposed to a high mold exposure, then it suppresses your immune system and it keeps the Lyme active. And it's tricky because there are so many, like there's no mold-free home. So there's mold everywhere, but you want it to be at safer levels. So there's a few different things that you can do, but basically the symptoms overlap and they work synergistically. Lyme and mold work synergistically together to prevent you from getting better. I've worked with people where they have Lyme disease, but once we've gotten the mold and their environment more conducive to them moving forward, the Lyme has actually been able to go in remission. I've also worked with people that have had a really bad case of Lyme disease, was able to get better, then had a bad mold exposure, and then relapsed and their Lyme became active. So really understanding how to do testing and treatment. So I work with a few different inspectors, remediators, building biologists. A lot of inspectors are not good. They go in, they do air sample testing. You can do the same air sample test in the same area multiple times and get different results. So unless you are doing an air sample of the wall cavity, putting a hole in the wall and taking an air sample that way, that's accurate. But I really like DNA PCR testing, like an ERMI test or a swab test, because what we're looking for is mold spores in the home. And an ERMI test is very common where it looks at 36 different types of mold spores in the home. And there's 6 of those that are more toxic than others. So you don't want those, if you have those toxic molds, you don't want them at higher levels. And mold spores create mycotoxins, which is what we breathe in and what keep us sick. 25% of the population has a gene called the HLA-DR gene. So this gene does not allow them to expel mold mycotoxins as effectively as possible. Most of my clients have this gene, and most of my clients also have Lyme disease. So they have 2 things running against them that is not allowing the mold to come out of their system. And so to get an idea of is mold playing a role in your recovery, we do testing on the home, and then we also do testing on the body. Richard Shoemaker is the pioneer for the Lyme mold world, and he has come up with CIRS biomarkers, chronic inflammatory response syndrome. So when you have Lyme, you're exposed to mold, you create a lot of inflammation. And there's certain biomarker tests that you can look into. When those biomarkers or those results come out abnormal, that gives you a better indicator that mold is running the show. There's a specific marker, C4A, that I use a lot. And when C4A is very elevated, that is telling me that you are having a serious exposure to mold, that your immune system is being suppressed, and it's keeping the Lyme activated. So even if you're getting these great Lyme treatments, but you still are being exposed to mold, you're only going to get so far in treatment. And then in regard to treatment, it's tricky because, you see, what I like to do is I like to test the home for mold spores, and I like to test the body for mycotoxins, and then I have a chart. And usually, if it's a present exposure, the mold spores line up with the mycotoxins that it creates from the testing of their body. And then I have a chart that goes into what specific binders to use to bind up these mold mycotoxins to get them out of the system. But for people that are very toxic, say you do a mycotoxin test, it's a urine test, and you don't provoke it. So you don't have them do like a sauna or something to make them sweat to get the toxins out. Or if they're not doing a lot of detox, then they're super toxic. Their drainage pathways are not open, kidneys, liver, lymphatic system, not open. So you're not getting an accurate test result for these mycotoxins. And that can be problematic. So when you're treating, and testing, you want to make sure you're opening up the drainage pathways so you get an accurate mycotoxin test. And then before bringing in binders, you want to make sure you open up these drainage pathways so that when you put these binders in that bind these toxins, you can have a die-off reaction. Just like when Lyme, you use antibiotics for Lyme, you have a die-off reaction and it flares symptoms up. Same thing can happen with mold. You don't want those toxins circulating throughout your system. You want them to get out. So again, it's the process of, if you are dealing with mold, doing different tests to figure out how big of a picture it's playing in your Lyme recovery, and then doing the right remediation, getting the right inspectors, and with treatment, using the right order of treatment so that your body's receptive to it without having a major flare up. The other thing that I'm a huge promoter of is mitochondria support. Your mitochondria takes a massive hit from not only Lyme disease, but also mycotoxins. So while you're going through treatment, supporting not only your detox pathways and your gut, but also your mitochondria along the way.
A lot of people talk about the binders, and you mentioned Dr. Schumacher, and that's the cholestyramine. Is that right? Is that a useful tool for mold remediation?
That's a great question. So cholestyramine, it's not one of my favorite binders because it only gets at ochratoxin, and there's many different mycotoxins. So I'm not against cholestyramine if your main mycotoxin is ochratoxin, but it can also be very constipating. So if you were to use it, you just want to make sure that you're supporting your system so that you are able to flush your system out, that your bile is moving correctly, so these toxins don't stay with you. There are a lot of other binders that I find to be like that. I like Ultra Binder that has activated charcoal and bentonite clay and zeolite, so it's getting at a lot of different mycotoxins, and you're taking one binder, like one powder, with a lot of different binding agents in it. But at the same time, that's an aggressive binder. So sometimes I'll use like PectoSol powder, which is an interesting binder because it gets toxins out, but it has something, citric acid, that basically stops galactin-3. And galactin-3 is an inflammatory marker. So when you do have a die-off reaction, it basically stops that inflammation. So someone that's just starting out who's super toxic, there are certain binders that I would use as opposed to others, depending on how sensitive they are.
Oh, okay. Right. So it really is scientific and specialized. It's not like we're just saying, you've got mold exposure, take a bunch of this stuff and call me. And this is really, you're doing an investigation to see what exactly occurred, right?
Exactly. And then also making sure your home is conducive. So even after remediation, there's so many things that I work on with my clients to make sure that they don't have another leak and things like that, that from here we're moving forward and we're not going to have setbacks.
And in regards to the home inspection, is there like any kind of insurance you can get for catastrophic insurance for mold contamination, or and how does that work with the home inspection? Do you have to sign off on that? Are
Yeah,
there any rules?
so depending on how the mold was created, verbiage is crucial. So say there was a flood, you don't want to say mold, you want to say like water damage. Yeah, so there are certain things that you can say so that because insurance companies have a specific stipend for mold and a specific stipend for water damage. And so the verbiage is key when you're filling out certain forms. But honestly, a lot of this adds up, a lot of it is not covered. And yeah, I just this past week I was Center for Lyme Action, which is a organization. It's a nonprofit that helps raise money for people with Lyme disease, getting better testing, treatment, awareness, things like that. But in the Lyme world, where mold is also in that world, it all adds up. And so, yeah, to get more awareness and get more coverage is crucial for people getting better.
Definitely. Yeah, the Center for Lyme Action is a commendable, admirable organization that's actually accomplishing a lot within the Lyme community. So appreciate you giving them a shout out.
Yeah, they're awesome.
Totally agree with you. The audience is asking if it's okay if they ask questions. We're going to be fielding at least a couple of questions from the audience, if that's okay with Michelle.
Of
And
course.
and then they want to know about the specific genes. The transcript will be available on the video after the stream, shortly after, maybe not immediately, but hang tight because it'll show up shortly thereafter.
Sounds
Michelle,
good.
thank you. You were speaking about digestive, being able to support that system. Can you tell us how much does diet factor into managing Lyme disease? A lot of people, they say no sugar, no meat, and that's understandable if they got the meat allergy too. But do they need meat? Do they need certain kinds of foods to be able to make it through this journey? What is your perspective on that?
So I think it's very individualized. A lot of my clients have come in and they do not have a healthy relationship with food. So their diets are very restrictive, and you need food. You need this nourishment to help you get better. Obviously, we don't want to be bringing in foods that's going to cause more inflammation. So, really looking at what specifically is going on in their body. If they're dealing with mast cell, then you're looking at foods that are lower in histamine levels, and that also understanding that foods that are left out for a few days, they grow more histamine. So looking at the specifics with that and the logistics is going to be important. I've actually noticed that my clients with mast cell, they do well with like a carnivore diet. But then if you have something like alpha gal syndrome, which is, for those of you listening that are not familiar, usually it's from a Lone Star tick and it can cause a meat allergy. And it's not just meat in food, it can be ingredients in cosmetics and prescriptions and things like that. And it can be so severe that people can become anaphylactic. So obviously, I would not be recommending meat for that population. But people with Lyme disease also are dealing with candida, especially if they've been exposed to mold. So there would be like a low sugar diet, things like that, cheese and stuff like that, that also has mold, that would be out of the question. Even coffee. Has super high levels of mycotoxins in it. So certain coffees that are third party tested would be beneficial. A lot of people have SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. So looking into an elemental diet or a low FODMAP diet. But I will say, SIBO is like very common, and a lot of times people don't respond well to SIBO treatments because they're still living in mold. So really just making sure that you have all the pieces so that when you're starting these dietary recommendations, like I love food. I'm all about food. It's one of my favorite things to like explore restaurants and things like that. And I want my clients to love food too and have a healthy relationship with it. And so when I put them on different dietary recommendations, this isn't an entire life thing. I want it eventually to be all about balance. So we do have restrictive diets in the beginning, but during that time, we're also using specific treatments to heal their gut so they're less sensitive to these other foods that can be also very nourishing. Some people go very extreme where it's like no sugar, but like, fruit, there's fruit that is low in like berries and kiwis and things like that, and also have good antioxidants in it. And then also foods that are high in good fats to help the mitochondria. That mitochondria needs your support. So really figuring out what specifically the client is dealing with and making it as individualized as possible, and working on their gut so that they can tolerate more foods.
Yeah, and no, that's something that I had to cut out actually also was the aged cheeses. I didn't realize until well into treatment how much it was actually affecting my digestive. But can you elaborate on that? Why is cheese sometimes not beneficial?
So it's interesting. Okay, so we have a few things going on. One, cheese is dairy, and dairy can be inflammatory. Um, Cow's milk has different enzymes than sheep's milk and goat's milk. So sometimes my clients do better with sheep's milk and goat's milk, depending on what they're dealing with. So cheese, one, dairy can be inflammatory, but also aged cheese, when things are aged more for people that are dealing with SIBO or histamine issues, that's going to be problematic. Even foods like, a lot of people will be like, oh, I had kombucha and fermented foods, and this is supposed to be really good for my gut. And for some gut issues like leaky gut, it can be helpful. But if you're dealing with SIBO or mast cell, then like that's not going to help you. That's going to flare up your symptoms. So really navigating what specifically you're dealing with and then working around that.
Thank you for elaborating on that. The and thank you for making time to be here with us today. We got a lot of people on the. Let me cut over to the stream for just a second because somebody had asked. Um, I'll pull it up in just a minute here.
Sure.
Okay, so well, what kind of therapies do you recommend for individual, and are they are they generalized or like is everybody got like a different treatment?
Okay, so I kind of have a certain way of doing things because I feel like each year I'm seeing more and more complex cases come in. I would say that so many people come in and they're super frustrated. They're like, I've spent so much money, I've seen so many doctors, I'm only sicker. This is a nightmare. Lyme is a nightmare. I spent all my money. Like, how am I going to get out of this? And I would say the biggest thing is implementing treatments in the right order so your body can be receptive to it. And so the first thing that I do is whether they're dealing with mast cells, stabilize their mast cells, whether they're not, either way, we still want to focus on opening up your drainage pathways because if they're dealing with environmental toxins and tick-borne infections, if we do killing protocols, they need to be getting out of the system, working on the gut. The gut has 70% of the immune system is in your gut. So making sure that your immune system is modulated better and that your gut can also handle treatments. I also think less is more. Some clients come in and they're on like so many supplements, and I'm like, okay, let's go through this because what's hindering you from getting better and what's actually moving you forward. So really getting your body ready for treating the root cause. So whether the root cause is environmental toxins, then looking into those logistics, making sure your environment is conducive to that, and then treating the tick-borne infections. Heavy metals is also an issue, but chelation therapy can be super aggressive. So like I would use something like phosphatidylcholine to help slowly get out toxins in a gentle way, but then later on may do more chelation therapies when their body's strong enough. Same with parasites. Parasitic treatment, many people will do as like one of the first things. But if you go aggressive with parasitic treatments, it's like one step forward, 10 steps backwards. So making sure your body is ready for these treatments is crucial. And I think everybody has parasites. So when you can get your body strong enough, doing like a parasitic cleanse twice a year, it's great for maintenance, but you don't just go directly to parasite treatment. And it's all about the order of which you do things so that your body is receptive to it. And I go low and slow. My clients are super sensitive, and I want to make sure that if they have a reaction to something, anything's possible with Lyme, that I understand what they're having a reaction to and why they're having a reaction to it. So yeah, I sometimes I say like fast is slow. If you go too fast, then it's like, okay, your body's like, no, no, no. Even if it's good things, like this is too much for me, and slow is fast. And I think that's really important. Probably the hardest lesson I had to learn myself when going through treatment, but an important one. And also just really listen to your body because I can help navigate you throughout this process. But at the end of the day, like you need to be willing to be consistent with treatment and also be intuitive with your body. Everybody is different. So what treatment may work for someone might not work for someone else, and really being vocal and communicative on how you're doing through treatment really helps me navigate the process.
So, okay, it's everybody has kind of the same possible things going on with them, but not everybody is experiencing the same things in all the same systems at the same time. It's you really got to take a look at it. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and to add to that, if people are looking for more specifics, like I'm more of a promoter of like antimicrobial herbals. I use the same herbalist that Dr. Horowitz uses. Her stuff is clean and potent, and we go low and slow, but I see a lot of success because it gets through biofilms. I also obviously like hyperthermia treatment. If I could do everything over again for myself, I would have done hyperthermia treatment first because it would have prevented me from getting a lot sicker and it would have been an easier process to get better. So yeah, there's certain antimicrobial pathogenic treatments that I'm a huge fan of. I don't think hyperthermia treatment is necessary for everybody. It's expensive. I had to do funding to go for me to afford it myself. But I do think it is one of, if not the best treatment out there to lower your pathogenic load. That said, there's still work to do before you go and when you come home. So yeah, pathogen wise, I really like antimicrobials and hyperthermia. And when you're doing those, making sure that your body is supported with detoxing, mitochondria support, and gut support.
What are the common reasons why someone would experience heavy metal overload on the heavy metals? Where does that come
Yeah.
from?
So honestly, before having Lyme disease, your body can filter out environmental toxins a lot better. Then having a higher pathogenic load, it's harder for your body to filter out environmental toxins. Heavy metals being one of them, whether it's the food in which you eat, or your environment in which you're around, or even like amalgam, so silver cavity fillings. I had my amalgams removed. Interesting, like so I like Vibrant Labs. They do a total tox test and it checks for mold mycotoxins, it tests for heavy metals, it tests for pesticides, plastics, things like that. And so I eat really clean. Like I feel like I maintain well with certain things that I need to do to stay healthy. And so I got my test results back and it was really high in glyphosate and BPA. And I was like, what the heck? Like I eat organic. On our yard, we have something called Get Sunday. So it's a organic way to treat your lawn that doesn't have Roundup in it. So I was like, why am I high in glyphosate and BPA? And what's cool about Vibrant is they set you up with doctors that are in the area. And I was like, where could this be coming from? And they were like, your water is probably where it's coming from. So then I did a deep dive into, okay, what's some of the best water filtration systems? I liked the AquaTrue. So I've been using that and I'm going to retest and see if that helps. But yeah, because of my past history with tick-borne infections and mold exposures, my body is more susceptible to environmental toxins. And I think like where you live, what you're drinking, all of that plays a role. So keeping your toxic bucket load is really important. And that goes into even like the products that you use in your home. EWG is a website where you can actually put your cleaning products or your cosmetics and your hair products on the site and it gives it a grade so that again, like your body is going to be more resilient if there's less toxins in your system.
Thank you. What is that website again? EWG?
Yeah, EWG, and you can go in and it has a lot of information on. You can even like test your tap water through them. Environmental Working Group, that's what they're called. But I remember going back to my mom's place, and my brother was there not feeling well. He's super sensitive because stiff person syndrome, and I took out her cleaning products and I went through them and I was like, Mom, these are all they're D's. We gotta bring them back to A's. So we completely revamped her cleaning supplies, and every little bit helps.
Oh wow. Oh, that's good to know. Definitely that it can have that kind of impact. Now, there's a lot of people out there that don't think that experiencing Lyme remission is even possible. Like this is just going to be, they're always going to be spending money on the supplements, the drugs, or the visits. Have you had honestly any patients that or clients that have experienced that full remission? They got their life back, and what does that look like? And can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I don't like using the word cure, but I have worked with a lot of people that have been able to put tick-borne infections in remission, so they are asymptomatic and are able to move forward with their life. Even like working with a lot of women who want to have a baby, they are concerned about gestational transmission, which is a very real thing that's not talked about. So getting their body to a point where they have a very low pathogenic load, low toxin load. They've been able to successfully have a baby and have a healthy baby, and then also doing certain treatments to help them move forward so they don't relapse with Lyme. Yeah, I definitely think Lyme is possible to get in remission. I think your environment plays a huge role in getting you in remission, but I've also seen that the things that cause people to get out of remission is mold, COVID, or the COVID vaccine. So the past 2 years, those have been the three triggers for people. But I've worked with a lot of people that have been completely debilitated and have been able to get their life back. Even myself, like I remember the day before I went to Germany for hyperthermia treatment, I had friends and family come over, and I remember looking at them. I remember looking at my Uncle Mike and being like, okay, I know you've been in my life, but there was like a detachment, like there was no connection. And I remember thinking, I'm so far gone. Like, I need this treatment to work because, like, I'm not myself anymore. And now I can recognize my Uncle Mike. Um, yeah. And so, like, even someone who was at such a debilitating state and had very little quality of life, I do have a quality of life now. I do have to be careful around like mold because I am sensitive to mold and I do detox, but I definitely think that you can get in remission and have your symptoms, even if you're not in complete remission, have your symptoms be much more manageable so that you can have an enjoyable life.
Yeah, I mean, if you've gone through it yourself, then that'll definitely make you a believer. Um, Hyperthermia, is that something that the body does naturally in certain circumstances, like exposure to certain infections? Does the body produce its own hyperthermic state? And how is the hyperthermic state achieved that you experienced, where it's manually brought on?
Yeah. So, hyperthermia or heating your body up, creating a fever, is your body's natural way to kill infections. And so, what these hospitals are doing, they're using infrared heat to create a fever. They go above 105. There's a lot of hospitals that do hyperthermia treatment that do moderate. That's 104 and below. That will boost your immune system. It's not going to kill pathogens. You really need to go above 105, 106, close to 107. The higher you go, the more pathogens you kill. They are monitoring you the entire time. They're not going to do anything that your body cannot tolerate. And again, I like that they use infrared heat. I only work with hospitals that use infrared heat. I think it's the safest way to do it and the only way to recommend. They're also inpatient hospitals. So when you do have a large die off of a pathogenic load, you're in an inpatient facility where they're detoxing you and supporting you and helping you to feel comfortable so that you can tolerate the treatments. And honestly, like, it sounds a lot scarier than it is. It's actually a very safe procedure. You are sedated during the hyperthermia treatment. And it was kind of nice to be in a place where it's like there's other people that are going through what I'm going through. This is really serious. People get it and they're taking me seriously. And I can have these few weeks to focus on really getting better and getting my body more resilient. Again, it was not a silver bullet treatment for me. But I noticed that when I came back, like, I would make plans, I'd actually be able to like do those plans. Like, I was like, oh, okay, like I can go to my friend's wedding. Or like I would got in a really bad car accident and I was like, oh my gosh, this is going to cause me to relapse. And I didn't. I felt crummy for a week and I bounced right back. So it just made my body so much more resilient.
So it uses infrared heat. What is that? That's not like the infrared sauna at the Planet Fitness, right? Where you stand in the
It's
booth
it
and
is kind of like it's kind of
is
like
it?
a sauna. They put you in a bed that's kind of like a sauna, and the difference is, so you can go, say you go to Planet Fitness and you go in a sauna and you put it to like 140 degrees. Your core body temperature doesn't get to 140 degrees. So saunas are great for detoxing, but it's not going to get high enough to kill pathogens. This is where you need to be in a facility with a doctor monitoring you where your core body temperature gets above 105.
But are they using needles or light bulbs?
It's not needles. It's light that's above you. There's also hospitals that will infuse something into your system to create a fever. I would not recommend that. I don't think that's safe. So yeah, really using infrared heat is what I feel like is the safest. Only way that I would do it, like if I got sick again, I'd go back to the hospitals that I work with, and I feel comfortable recommending these hospitals.
Got it, got it. So there is actually a difference in the way that hyperthermia can be manually onset in the body, and you want to be particularly keen about which one the hospitals you're thinking about utilizing do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've been asked to work with a lot of different hospitals, and I feel like, um, I, yeah, if I wouldn't do it myself, I'm not going to recommend it to somebody else. But the hospitals that I work with, I feel like they are very thorough, and my clients are taken care of, and they're able to move forward.
Thank you for elaborating on that. What
Yeah.
What are some of the warning signs people should pay attention to if to start suspecting Lyme disease? You know, a lot of people, I think, they discard the potential of Lyme disease, but is there anything specific, like a symptom or something they could experience that they should go, wow, maybe I should pay attention to Lyme disease?
You know, this is tricky because a lot of people think Lyme disease, the bullseye rash, but that's not always the case. I mean, for say you get bit by a tick, usually if you get bit by a tick, you're transferring Lyme, but also co-infections. So a lot of times people will have like a cat scratch almost. It yeah, it looks like a cat scratched you, and that would be an indicator of Bartonella. So it's not always the bullseye rash, but also just like being cognizant of have you been camping? Have you been hiking? Have you been in swampy areas? There are certain very like Lyme pandemic areas. I got bit when I was in Fire Island, Hamptons, things like that. Like where you're located plays a huge role in if there's more ticks in that area. And then in regard to symptoms, I mean, some people, it's a slow process where their immune system can handle it and they don't realize that they have Lyme until something serious happens, like a divorce or a car accident. And then other people, it's like they have flu-like symptoms. For me, it was full-blown encephalitis. So I had something called Powassan virus that is the most fatal of the tick-borne infections. And so I had meningitis. So I went from being healthy. I was working with my friends at Fire Island at an ice cream store, hanging out on the beach every day. I was like, this summer is going to be awesome. And then I got bit by a tick and I was like, I can't function. I can't think. Like even swallowing was like basic forming sentences. It was insane. I went from like, yeah, completely healthy to very debilitated. So everybody is different, and I think it's dependent on what infections you're battling, your genetics, and how your immune system can handle it. But again, symptom-wise, it can come in any form. It does not discriminate. So it's not just the bullseye rash. It's not just the flu-like symptoms. Yeah.
And the audience wanted to know if they missed the Morgellons discussion. Thank you if you just now tuned in. We haven't talked about Morgellons. We're going to do that. Not quite yet. I just want to ask you one more question before we get to the big one. What about emotional turmoil? Is that something that can really impact a person's ability to manage Lyme disease?
100%. I think Lyme is, and tick-borne infections in general, and the other things that factors that come along. So mast cell activation syndrome and biotoxin illness. It's so misunderstood, and it took a while for my family and my friends to get on board. And so there was this whole period where I felt so alone. And I wasn't sure if I was going to die. Like I knew how sick I was, but people weren't getting it. So yeah, it definitely takes a toll, and having a support group is crucial. Generation Lyme is a support group that I really like because there's people that are on the other side, people that are still sick. They have like partner meetups, they have women meetups, men meetups, things like that. But yeah, having the support is crucial. And then even like, you know, tick-borne infections cause inflammation in all areas of your body. But even like if it's not in your brain, like if you have inflammation in your gut, it can cause inflammation in your brain. So it can cause you to become depressed and anxious and things like that. It can also impact your limbic system. Your limbic system is what creates PTSD. So say I'm working with clients and we lower their pathogenic load and we lower their toxin load, but they still are having some symptoms. That's where there's programs like the Gupta program or Primal Trust or DNRS with Annie Hopper, where it's like, okay, you just went through something incredibly traumatic that most people should never have to go through and most people don't understand. And your body's safe now, but it's hard for your body to feel safe because it hasn't been safe for so long. So I think there's so many different factors that play a role in the mental and emotional piece.
You really have to kind of learn how to live all over again.
Yes.
Wow. Well, this is the big one. Everybody wants to know. What are your thoughts on Morgellons?
So to be totally transparent, I've only worked with one client of mine that has Morgellons. And for me, yeah, it that person was incredibly uncomfortable when they came in, and they were like, they took a hot bath, and then they weren't my client at the time, but then they reached out and they were like, there's something coming out during this bath, and I'm having skin lesions and my skin's burning and I'm very uncomfortable. So then I looked into it more and I was like, okay, I think you're dealing with more Magellans. And for me, it was about, okay, your body's saying like, I'm on overload. So let's wean things back. Let's get some toxins out of your system. Let's lower this pathogenic load. Let's go low and slow because your body is just at its max. It's at its breaking point. But yeah, I haven't worked with that many people that have had it. So yeah, it's something that I'd love to learn more about, and yeah, I'm sure I'll come in contact with more people because it's not something that's going away, and it can go hand in hand with Borrelia.
Absolutely. And that's something that you touched on. A lot of people don't really hear a lot about is how it affects people in the showers, in the baths. That's when it can be especially uncomfortable for patients.
Yeah, she showed me pictures of what was going on, and I was like, okay, let's figure this out. And that was the first time I ever dealt with it. But then really reeling things back, I thought that what the treatment that she was on was pretty aggressive, that if we were able to reel it back, that helped to really have her manage her symptoms a lot better.
That's commendable. Just being able to have that feeling like things aren't completely out of control, I think, is comforting for Morgellons patients. I call it Morgellons, but a lot of people call it Morgellons. It's fine either way.
That's good to know. Thank you.
Michelle, thank you for making time for us this afternoon. Would you care to tell us, what do you like to do when you're not at work?
So I actually moved to Colorado this past year, and my favorite thing to do is exploring. So it's been so fun. I actually didn't realize how big Colorado was when I moved here. So it's been kind of nice, like taking short weekend trips, places that are just like 2 hours away, and exploring totally new areas, going to new restaurants, new hikes, things like that. So yeah, I really like exploring and getting to know new places, and that's probably my favorite thing to do.
Yeah, sometimes a change of scenery can really make all the difference in the world, right?
Yeah, I've absolutely loved living in Colorado so far. So it's been a nice change.
Very cool. People can reach out to you if they want to contact you and talk to you about possibly seeing you. How can they do that?
Yeah, so my website is thelimespecialist.com. They can also email me at Michelle with 2 L's at thelimespecialist.com. I also have an Instagram account, The Lyme Specialist, and then a Facebook group, The Lyme Specialist. So even if you go on my website, you can find all that information on my website as well.
Beautiful. Perfect. Thank you so much. And I hope to have you back on the show here again. We've learned a lot about a lot of different topics that are definitely all involved with Lyme disease. Thank you, Michelle.
Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And I really appreciate what you're doing to create more awareness on these topics that are so important.
You too. Definitely. Thank you. All right. Y'all take care, and we'll see you soon.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. Okay, Michelle, it's just you and I.